Welcome to MindShift Power Podcast, the only international podcast focused on teens, connecting young voices and perspectives from around the world. Get ready to explore the issues that matter to today's youth and shape tomorrow's world. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mindshifter. And welcome, everyone. Today we have with us a return guest, James Devine. He is out of Colorado. He is a speaker, middle school teacher, musician, and podcaster. Today we're here because he's also an author. And we're going to talk about forgiveness. So, how are you doing today, James?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on again. As you know, I like to dive right in. So tell us, why are you here today?
I am here today because I want to share a little bit about my journey. So the quick nutshell of it is from the ages of 6 to about 9, I was molested by a friend of the family. Molested is actually too nice of a word. I was raped by him repeatedly over the course of those several years. And then he moved away, and I thought, okay, now the healing starts. I was just a little kid. I didn't tell anybody about it. But what I found was that this hatred grew within me until by the time I was 16, I wanted to kill him. And I also realized, because my faith was important to me, that I needed to forgive him. But I didn't know how to do that. So I did finally, at the age of 16, take that first step of forgiveness. And that began my healing journey at that point. But really, that decision to forgive is really just a first step. So over the years, I've kind of developed through talking to people and through my own journey, I ended up finally developing a course that takes people through the many steps that I've taken throughout my life to forgive.
I think it's really awesome that you are taking your pain and turning it into someone else's treasure. That is a beautiful thing that I respect a lot. Tell us, why do we need to forgive?
You know, if we don't forgive, you can see how it affected me emotionally with where I wanted to kill this guy. And I'm actually thankful he moved away, because I think I could have accomplished that if the abuse had continued and I had access to him. And where would my life be now if I had done that? I'd be in jail probably.
Yep.
I wouldn't have got to marry my wife. I wouldn't have 4 beautiful kids. Grandbaby number 11 is on the way now. Wow. The reason we need to forgive is because unforgiveness affects us emotionally, financially, believe it or not, physically, and spiritually. And I'll talk about maybe one of the physical things a little bit later, but it can affect every aspect of our lives.
How can it affect us financially? Explain that.
So for me, I really struggled with my worth for many years. And so if someone said, so I'm a musician, for example, and if someone said, well, you want to come play for us and we'll pay you $20, there was a time I used to say yes. And I would kind of resent it, because it's like, I just played for 3 hours for $20, but that's probably all I'm worth. I didn't say this out loud, but it was what was in my brain.
Right.
And so when I was younger, it affected me. My mom was the same way. She went through a lot of the same abuse. And in the 80s, minimum wage was $5 an hour. And my mom was really great at cleaning. And she worked for this restaurant that you could seat like 70 people, if you just kind of picture that in your head. But she could clean it in an hour. And so the guy paid her $5. She clocked in and cleaned it, and she worked really fast. But she thought, well, that's all I'm worth. And I remember telling her at one point, I said, Mom, someone who had a cleaning business, they would, at that time, I mean, prices are higher now, but at the time they would have said $50, $75 to clean this restaurant. And she was doing it for $5. So we just value ourselves less because we think of ourselves less when we are still struggling with that unforgiveness.
That's pretty deep. And you're right. You're absolutely right. When we value ourselves as less, it affects our finances. It affects entrepreneurship. It affects whether or not we go to college, pursue it affects what we pursue, basically. And also what we accept, which is why many, 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 many youth who are sexually assaulted when they're younger or regularly molested end up being promiscuous or end up with people that abuse them in different ways. It all boils down to self-worth. And that's not the only aspect of anything, but that's a big part of it. So you're absolutely right. And most people wouldn't think about how it affects them financially. So what did you say with the other areas? There's financing and
spiritually, physically, financially, emotionally, basically every area of our lives in some
Yes.
way. It
Yeah.
affects it differently.
So can you break down why that's true and how that's true?
I think the self-esteem aspect of it is probably the biggest thing. The shame,
Mm-hmm.
that is a big part of it too. It just knocks us on the ground, and we just don't think we're worth it. And then when you internalize things, so maybe I'll step through each of these things. If you internalize unforgiveness and you have hatred towards someone, it affects your physical body, your physical
Mm-hmm.
health, and holds you back. It holds you back in every area, just like what you were saying with whether you go to college or what college you think you could go to or what career you can aspire to. Even how you present yourself when you're meeting other people and going for interviews. I've been on interview committees before, and you have someone come in and they're like, I hope I get this job. And you feel sorry for them, but you wonder, like, what if they've been through, because they're not coming in with confidence. Then
Right.
you have
Yeah.
people who
Yeah.
come in with arrogance too, and
Yeah.
that's bad as well. But you can see the people who've been hurt.
So when it comes to unforgiveness, now in your case, it was sexual molestation,
Correct.
repeated, continuous sexual molestation. That was the root of your anger that needed to release and let go of. But does it have the same effect if you're unforgiving of your father who used to beat your mother, for example?
I think it could be the same. And that's also part of my story. My father was abusive to my mom. And I think that actually contributed to me being more easily molested by this guy, because I
Mm,
already started with low self-esteem. So
mm,
those things can keep going on. And as you know, that we see young people who continue to, almost like they're drawn to abusive people,
yes.
but it's to try to satisfy some kind of need. And I'm not putting any blame. Please don't anyone think that the blame is on the young person. It took
Right.
me a long time to realize I was a little boy. I had
Right.
no control over how this adult was acting in my life. He was the one 100% guilty. But when I was younger, I felt like it was my fault, and I felt a lot of shame with what had happened and thought that it was due to me. But those things have effects that continue on to, for example, if someone had a father in their home who was abusive, then they may go on and be married to someone who abuses them, and they think
Right.
that's okay, because that
Yeah.
my sister went through that.
Hmm.
We were so surprised when she finally left her husband and she told us about the abuse, and we were thinking, why didn't you tell us? And she said she felt like she deserved it. And we were like, no, you're not. You're a child of God. You don't deserve
Yeah.
any of that. But that's what she felt like, because she had seen it in my father.
Mm. And you hit the nail on the head when you said that. I mean, I seem to come on this subject a lot here, on this podcast because it's so relevant to humans. But it's more to me. It's important that this message gets across to the youth because they can stop some messed up stuff that us adults are still dealing with if they deal
Right.
with it now. So when it comes to unforgiveness, take us through. So you have a course, and your course is about unforgiveness. Can you tell us a little bit about that course and what it's called?
Sure. It's just called Forgive and Live Workshop is what the course is called. And it takes people through a lot of the same steps that I've been through myself. And I'm just going to cover a couple of them. For example, sometimes people think, oh, I forgave, so now everything's good. That's how my mom looked at things. My mom stayed with my father probably too long, and she just accepted it. Well, I forgive him. I forgive him. And then he would be abusive again. Well, I forgive him. Okay, well, there now further consequences need to be taken. Even when I told my mom at age 16 when about the abuse that had happened to me, she still had a way to be in touch with, to have the police find this man, but she gave up too easily, and I had to actually forgive my mom. So one of the things that I talk about is forgiveness does not mean excusing someone.
Say
So,
that
for
again.
example, forgiveness does not mean excusing someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I mean by that is So for example, the man who abused me, his name is George. I can forgive him and still pursue all the criminal penalties he deserved. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. This was so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And plus I kind of went with what my mom was doing, and he's probably passed now. So you can forgive someone and have them face the consequences of what they've done. So for example, if someone murdered someone in your family, they should go to jail. Even if you forgive them, even if they receive 100% forgiveness, they still need to be in jail for what they did. If someone
Absolutely.
abuses a kid, they still need to be in jail. We can all forgive them, but it doesn't mean we excuse them and pass it off. I mean, the small things in life we are going to. So if someone snubbed us and it made us feel bad, that's something we need to forgive and move forward from. But if someone did something where they deserve some kind of punishment through the criminal system, then that's something that we should do.
Absolutely. Forgiveness does not mean that you forget or that there
Right.
shouldn't be any consequences, because if there's no consequences, what are we doing?
Right. And forgiveness, here's another important one from the course. Forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. So, as we have siblings and we have friends, sometimes we have disagreements with them, and you always want to try to reconcile with those small things and become friends again.
What does reconcile mean?
So reconcile is when the relationship is restored to what it was before.
So you're saying just because we forgive them, we don't necessarily have to restore a relationship?
Correct. Especially when the offense is so grievous that like molesting a child or spousal abuse. Mm-hmm. So if you had a spouse, for example, who abused you, you could forgive them. They could face the consequences in jail for what they did. But it doesn't mean when they get out of jail that you have to remain married. That would be reconciliation. Sometimes that happens, but in many cases, it's not. And the example I like to give is around 2005 or whenever it was that Facebook started becoming a thing. I connected with the daughter of the man who had abused me.
Oh, wow.
And we hadn't seen her in 20, 25 years. But so I noticed in her friends list that her dad was in there. It looked like he was sitting in a halfway house type of place. And all of a sudden, all these things that for years I hadn't even thought about him, mm-hmm. I hadn't mm-hmm. given him any consideration. I thought, well, what if he sees that I'm friends with his daughter? What if he asked me to be a Facebook friend? What if he showed up at my door and said, hey, I just want to tell you I'm sorry for what I did. None of those things ended up happening, but I started going through it in my head. And it's like, if he should, first of all, the Facebook friend, that would have been easy. I would have denied it. That never happened though. But if he showed up at my door, I would say, I forgive you. Now get the hell off my porch. So I don't need to be reconciled to him.
Right. No, that's a good example. So what does forgiveness actually mean then?
Forgiveness means we are putting what happened to us in the past. We're doing our best to not let it affect us today. And sometimes we have to make that decision to forgive again and again and again, because different things come up in different points of our lives. So the example for me, at the age of 16, I decided to forgive George. And that was step one on a 1,000-mile journey of healing. That now at age 58, I'm still on that journey, but now I'm on about mile 997. So it's like I can see the end now. But when I took that first step, I couldn't see the end. And as different things happened in my life, different remembrances came up that I had to forgive again for. And what I mean is, like when my firstborn son, when he turned 5, I'm looking at this 5-year-old boy and thinking, how could someone abuse a 5-year-old boy? He's small. He's just a kid. And so it brought back all these feelings and thoughts, and I had to forgive again. And then when I was an adult and I realized my mom did not do all the things that she could have, I had to actually forgive my mom, mm-hmm. because I think that she could have prevented some of this from happening. Like, she didn't listen to me. And I'll give you a clear example of that. The very last time that George abused me, he showed up at our church. I hadn't seen him for about 6 months. He showed up at our church, and he was asking my mom, people used to call me Jimmy when I was a kid. He asked my mom, hey, can Jimmy come over to my place today and I'll bring him back tonight? And I was saying, no, 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 I don't want to go. And my mom was like encouraging me. She's like, oh, come on, Jimmy, go ahead and go. You'll have a good time, and he'll bring you back tonight. And I didn't really want to go, but George whispered in my ear, and he's like, oh, don't worry, nothing will happen. Well, something happened. And that was the last time, because he moved away after that. But I had to actually forgive my mom for that. But I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it as the 8-year-old boy, but I realized it as like the 38-year-old man. It's like, why did my mom do that? And I was crying over it. And even now I can feel the emotion coming up. Sorry. I can feel some of that emotion coming up, anger at my mom for pushing me towards that day. I mean, she didn't know. But I still had to forgive her because she wasn't listening to her little boy saying, no, no, I don't want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've said this on episodes before, but I'm going to say it again. For parents who are out there listening, when your child, sometimes children are just acting up because they don't want to go to the house where they don't get lollipops. Sometimes that's the case. But when your child is adamantly, seriously objecting going with or being near someone, there's always a reason, and you really should look into that.
Yes, yes. There was one church we had attended, and we only had gone there one time. And when we went to go the second time, and we brought my daughter to the nursery, she started like fighting us. She was like about 3 years old. She started crying and fighting us. And this wasn't usual behavior for her. She wasn't usually afraid to go to some place like that. And so we ended up not going there, and we couldn't pinpoint whether it could have been something like a kid slapped her, who another 3-year-old or a 3-year-old bumped into her. But we didn't want to take any chances. So we never went back to that
and
church.
that's a good idea, because there's always clues. Sometimes we don't know what we're looking at.
Yeah.
But that's something that for anyone listening right now, you don't have to be a parent. You could be just a parent adjacent. You could just have, kids around you that you see. If a child is looking that fearful of going with or near someone, there's always a reason. And you should, it's not always sexual molestation, but it can be something just as bad. You should always investigate. We have to pay attention to our kids and their responses. So with forgiveness, tell us, you have this course. What else is in this course? Well, first of all, let me ask you this. This podcast is focused on teens and anything that has to do with them and their future. You're 58 years old. You an old man. Why are you on here talking teens?
Well, I've been where you're at. So what I tell even my students that I teach, I still teach middle school students. And then I have some private lesson students all the way from like 3rd grade up to high school. So I get a lot and my grandkids go from 13 down to 1. My oldest is 13 years old. So what I tell students all the time, I tell them, I've been where you're at. So I've been your age. I've been through some of the same things, but you haven't been my age yet. So we can learn from the people who are older than us. In fact, one of the things I think that saved me, besides my faith and that starting that forgiveness journey, is I always found, for me, I always had an emptiness, like I felt like I needed an older man in my life. Mm-hmm. And I found some great mentors throughout the years that didn't do abusive things to me and poured into my life. And so many times when someone's been on a journey, we can either learn the hard way. I felt like I had to learn the hard way. And I'll tell you about my mom. My mom was against counseling. I think my journey could have been faster if I had gotten counseling, but she was totally against it. So I had to learn a lot of these things the hard way. So why learn the hard way? And it wasn't until I was 50 years old that I really felt like I was who I was meant to be and finally got there. But it could have happened a lot sooner. And so I'm hoping that with this course, people can start their own journey and get to mile 997 sooner than I did, because if you got some speed behind you, it's going to be faster. I felt like my journey was a crawl and a walk for that duration. But the times do change, because I had one of the great things about working with middle schoolers, they always have great comebacks for you. There's not
They
ever a
do.
day. There's never a day that is uninteresting. I love working with
True.
middle school students. And so one of them said, when I said I said, well, I've been your age, but you've never been my age. He came back with, yeah, but you've never been my age in this year. And I
Which
was
is
like,
true.
okay, you have a point. But the temptations were similar, sometimes different. So we didn't have a phone we could carry with us
Yeah.
all the time. But the phone was a big deal between my mom and me, if she thought I was spending too much on the landline phone. So things are just different. Now we have 20 different kinds of media. But when I was a kid, you could end up watching too much TV if you weren't careful. I do have to say, the advantage that I had as a kid that is more difficult today, I was bullied in middle school. At least when I went home, I had about 12 hours of relief from bullying. Now, in this day and age with cell phones and social media, I think the bullying never stops. And so I
Yeah.
feel bad for the
True.
young people who are being bullied, who never get a break from it,
Yeah.
because then it continues on with the social media.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing that's different. But I've been your age and you've never been my age.
I like that. I like that response. You've never been my age, but yes, my point in asking that in a humorous way is this is relevant to all of us. It doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter if you're 12 or 50, 58 or 82. The unforgiveness still hurts us.
Right.
It is like acid to our souls. If you put certain kinds of acid on your skin, it will eat through your skin. And eventually it can kill you because it eats through your skin. Unforgiveness is acid to our souls. And it hurts us because now we're running around with this sore, this burning within us, when we could be free to do other things and grow instead.
Right.
But we're holding on to this unforgiveness, and unforgiveness, as you know, turns into bitterness eventually. Unforgiveness just starts off as unforgiveness, but it branches off into other things as it grows its roots deeper and deeper into our souls. Right?
Right. Right. I had a professor in my, I went back for my master's degree when I was a little bit older. And I had a professor he was the nicest guy, but he hated doctors. He was probably in his mid 60s, early 60s, still fairly young, but he got sick. And for about 2 weeks, he missed work. And they said he never missed work. And so all his coworkers were like, you need to go see the doctor. And it turned out he had cancer all throughout his body. So when he finally did go see the doctor, he only had about 2 weeks left, and then he passed away, and very quickly and very suddenly. And so that I like the example of the acid, but I also think of it as a cancer too.
Yeah.
If we let that bitterness grow, it might look on the outside like everything's fine. It looks like we're doing okay, but that cancer is on the inside eating us away. And it's going to kill us if we're not careful. My mom was the most guilty about not forgiving. She just kind of pulled her bootstraps up. She raised her kids. She made it through life. She was a single mom most of the time I was growing up after she did finally leave my dad. And then she never got help because she's like, all I need is God. And there's a grain of truth in that, but God put us with other people because other people can help us.
Right.
That it's sort of like when I'm teaching kids music, some of them will say, well, I can just look on YouTube and learn some things. Yeah. But having a teacher right next to you, teaching you some things is important as well. And so my mom, here I am, I'm 58. I try to move about 8 miles a day, either walking or running. I lift weights, I hike, I'm out and active, and I feel like I'm in the best health of my life. When my mom was in her early 50s, she already was acting like an old lady because this bitterness just was consuming her. And she would sit in her apartment and pretty much do nothing all day. And if you tried to get her, even if she moved out close to us at one point, and we would say, "Hey, Mom, we're going to lunch. You want to join us?" "No, I don't like that food." Um, and so she just was like, had this life that she made that was very kind of boring, but she didn't really involve herself with other people. And surprisingly, she lived to be 77, which we were all surprised about because we didn't think she would make it to 60 because her health was so poor all the time from her early 50s. And I think what happened, in my opinion, that unforgiveness and bitterness within her grew like a cancer, and just she had pains all over her body. And I believe it was from this unforgiveness that it was happening to her.
You are 1,000% right. Unforgiveness has physical effects on us, and that
Yes.
bitterness has physical effects on us. It hurts our legs. It makes our heart work harder. It does things to it just so many different parts. I'm not a doctor, but I think y'all get the point. It really has physical effects. So when people, how long does this course take that you have?
I think it's really self-paced. I never
Mm-hmm.
really thought about how long it would take, but
Yeah.
there's probably about 12 lessons, and they're all fairly short. So someone could probably be done with the whole course in about 2 hours. But the best thing is probably to do one lesson at a time and give it a couple of days to sink in. Or they could do it in 2 hours and then go back and repeat some of the lessons to really do some deep work. It comes with video instruction, and then there's also a PDF that you can download that some people find healing by doing some writing. So I think
Okay.
there's some prompts to do some writing. Some people don't like doing that, and that's okay. Use it whatever way works best for you.
Can you give us an example of one of the steps that's in the book, or in the course rather? Sorry.
So one of the steps is going to be to actually decide that you're going to forgive. And once you make that decision, that's usually the first step. But then the other steps just talk about some of the things that I've gone through, and it's more than steps. It's more like teaching about what some of the false assumptions are about forgiveness, and what to do when you encounter different things, and definitely encouraging people to seek out counseling as well, depending on what the forgiveness that you're trying to seek involves. But I have like 6 or 8 of the things where it talks about forgiveness is not, like we talked about earlier, forgiveness is not excusing, forgiveness is
Right.
not reconciliation,
I think
because those are a lot of misconceptions that people have.
one of the other biggest misconceptions we haven't mentioned yet is is forgiveness a feeling? Do you need to feel it first?
No, no. We're the our one of the drawbacks of our modern society is we've gone too much to the
Yes.
feelings. We
Yes.
tend to swing back and forth. If you look at the World War II generation, they were not about feelings at all, and
Yeah.
that was too far on one side. And now everything is about feelings today for many people, and somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
the middle is the right response. But if we wait
Right.
till we feel forgiveness, we're not going to do it. We have to make the decision, and we have to, and it's not, oftentimes it's not a one and done. It's, I need to forgive. And then the thoughts come back, or anger comes back, or the murderous thoughts like I had come back. And it's like, no, I already forgave that. I'm not going to follow my
Yes.
feelings in this, because it's not our feelings are good. They're given to us by God, but they're not, we can't use that as our sole rationale. We want to use the rational side of our brain and the feeling side of our brain, and have them come together in the middle.
Right. It's a decision first and the feelings will follow.
Yeah. And
And
it's
not
sort
the
of
other
like,
way around.
right, right. And it's sort of like this is maybe a silly example, but like, I don't particularly enjoy exercising. So if I waited till I felt like exercising, I would never do it. I
Right.
just make it my habit. I'm going to go do it because I know it will make me feel better later. To go back to the cancer example too, if you were to go to the doctor today and you found out you had massive cancer throughout your body, and he's like, we're scheduling you for surgery tomorrow, there's going to be pain involved because that cancer has grown. And when they're
Mm.
cutting out that cancer and stitching you back up, there's going to be pain involved. But the
Mm.
reason why people go through that pain is because they know on the other side, their body is going to be more healthy. And so even spiritually, it can be that way. If we've let a cancer grow in us, it's going to be painful when it gets cut out and removed. But then the healing is going to begin and will get better as that wound improves.
I think that those are both really excellent analogies. And I do think the exercise was a good analogy too. I love the cancer analogy because I think that's something all of us can really relate to and really kind of get the concept. And you're 100% right on that. So how can people find this course and how much is it?
So it's absolutely free. And I know you're going to put a link in your show notes, but people can also go to jamesdevine.net and you'll find it there in the store, as well as a story, a book about my journey called Sad Boy, Joyful Man. And that book also is absolutely free on that page.
So for all of you listening right now, audience, I don't care what your age is. If you know that you need to forgive someone for something heinous that was done to you or done to a loved one, you know that you need to forgive, and you know that what we're saying is true. You just don't know how to do it. That's what this is for. So James has taken the time to put together something for you to guide you in that process. The book isn't, not the book. The course is not going to do it for you. You still have to do it yourself, but it's just to guide you so that you can arrive at the freedom of getting over it instead of staying under it.
Yep. Yes.
Well, James, thank you so much for coming on again today. I've been wanting to talk about this topic for a while, so I'm glad that we can do more than just talk about the topic, but we can actually offer them something that they can put in their hands to actually solve it. So I thank you again for creating that and coming on here again today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And now for a mind-shifting moment. I want to go back and emphasize something that was said earlier in the episode. Forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling. It's so easy to stick on to those feelings, to hold on to those feelings of anger, of hurt, and those feelings are legitimate. However, it is a choice to let them go. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a choice. The feelings will follow the choice. And as he said earlier, it's a daily choice. It's multiple choices, one step at a time. It's a choice. When you let go, you're choosing to not embitter yourself. You're choosing not to let the cancer run through you. So make a choice. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe to MindShift Power Podcast on any of our worldwide platforms, so you too can be a part of the conversation that's changing young lives everywhere. And always remember, there's power in shifting your thinking.